as Matt said, my wife Kay and I, we moved here with our little guy Leo 2 years ago from Nova Scotia. And we came to SunWest because I Googled handsome pastors in Calgary. Couldn't find any, so we're here at SunWest. And no, I'm kidding. Matt, you are dashing. But I actually did Google. My best friend back in Dartmouth was a pastor of a Mennonite Brethren church. I loved what he was doing. I loved the mission of the church. My church was very similar. And so I Googled Mennonite Brethren churches in Calgary. We're close by, just in Palliser there. And we came here. So moved here about 2 years ago, started coming about 2 months later. And came here one Sunday and we've never left. And we've been so blessed by so many people here. I would start naming names, but I would forget somebody and I'd probably start crying, and I don't want to do that. So we've just found it a real privilege to be here amongst you, and it's just such an amazing place here at SunWest, an amazing church community. So enough about me. We're continuing in this series, Hall of Faith, this morning, and we are going to be looking at the story of Abraham. And the idea with the Hall of Faith is that we are looking at these characters in Scripture that God used for his purposes, that God used in various ways, and these are our forefathers and our foremothers in the faith. They are part of our Christian story. They're part of why we're here, because God chose to partner with them. And as Matt said last week, we're all familiar with the idea of a hall of fame. There's that for sports, there's that for the arts, for music, for different industries. And sometimes people in the Hall of Fame can feel like these super people that us regular folk, we're never gonna attain what they have attained. But it would be a mistake to think that this Hall of Faith series is about these spiritual giants who attain something that we will never attain. That's actually not the point of the Hall of Faith series. It comes out of Hebrews 11, where the writer there lists a bunch of stories of God's people and their faith and how God used them. And the idea of these stories is the Bible doesn't shy away from, they had amazing moments, they had flaws, and then they had downright failures. And the Bible doesn't shy away from their failures. The Bible tells us all these things, and we're actually called to imitate them in the ways that they were faithful and obedient, being aware that, like them, we're also going to have flaws and failures. So the Hall of Faith isn't meant to, put these people on a pedestal and say, wow, they're amazing, that's great, but we'll never be able to obtain what they obtained. The Hall of Faith is looking at the lives of people, ordinary people that God used in miraculous ways, and calling us to actually listen to their story, learn from their story, try to follow where they followed well. And then, if you're like me, you take a lot of encouragement when things don't go well for them and when they have a hard time following Jesus, because that's my story every day. So this morning we're going to look at Abraham, and I put Abraham up. I really should have put Abraham and Sarah, because she's as much a part of the story as he is. There's moments we're going to look at where it's just Abraham and God, but Sarah is part of this story as well. And I first encountered the story of Abraham and Sarah when I was in college. I went to a Christian college in Saskatchewan, Briarcrest. I've learned a lot of Briarcrest people are here. Raise your hand if you know Briarcrest. Yeah, a few of you have been meeting some people. And I grew up in a Christian home, but I really had little interest in Jesus. For the first 20 years of my life, I kept Jesus really at arm's length. My thinking was there was me, there was fun and all the things I wanted to do, and there was this wall named Jesus between me and fun. And I thought, I'll go to Briarcrest. I went there to study music. And my attitude was truly, I'll eventually learn how to live the boring Christian life. And I went to Briarcrest with that very lively pursuit. And I got there, and my very first semester, I studied the first 5 books of the Bible called the Pentateuch, took a class on the Pentateuch, and I encountered the story of Abraham, and my whole life was truly changed in that moment. My whole life, I met a God who wanted to partner with people to bring blessing and flourishing into the world. And I can picture the classroom that I was in. I remember my prof obviously very well. He meant a lot to me. And I can just picture that moment of sitting there and God completely changing my attitude towards him, my mind towards him, completely changing who I thought he was through this story of Abraham, and God calling him to bring blessing and flourishing to this world. So let's talk a little bit about who is Abraham, who is Sarah. They are a couple. Abraham enters the Bible, if you don't know, very early on. He's in the 12th chapter of Genesis. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. So he is super early on. And Genesis is this book of beginnings. It's all about the beginning of the world. It's all about the beginning of God's relationship with humanity. It's all about God's relationship with all of creation. It's about where things went wrong. Genesis is written to kind of address this question of like, who are we and how did we get here? And it's all about these different beginnings and the beginnings of the people that God calls to be his representatives. And so Abraham comes into the story in chapter 12, and this is after kind of a marathon of pain. Genesis 1-2 starts with this beautiful picture of harmony. There's harmony between God and creation. There's harmony between God and humanity. There's harmony between humanity and creation. Things are going well. God wants to partner with humanity. God doesn't just do everything for us. He actually chooses people to partner with. And then Genesis 3 is where things go wrong as we as the humans push away from God. And from Genesis 3 to 11, you kind of have things going from bad to worse. This is where you get humans grabbing to become like God rather than wanting to partner with God. This is where you get stories of Adam and Eve grabbing for this fruit, wanting to overstep the gifts God had given them. You get their son, Cain, murdering their other son, Abel. This is where you get the flood story and God mourning over creating this creation he's made where he just sees evil all the time. This is where you get people gathering together to try and build this Tower of Babel, which is really about them exalting themselves. And so you read Genesis, the first 11 chapters, and it's kind of this downward spiral of things going from bad to worse. And there's this question that hangs over chapter 11 by the time you get to the Abraham story. There's this question of like, what is God going to do now with this broken, fallen world? And this is where we meet this dear older couple. I'm not going to say old. Actually, in their day, it was probably more middle-aged because Abraham does live to 175 years old. And when we first meet them, their names are Abram and Sarai. Abram and Sarai. And so some of the verses that I read that's early in their story, it refers to Abraham as Abram. And eventually, as God uses him, God changes their name to Abraham and Sarah. But the world in Genesis 11 is a mess of pride, and yet God isn't giving up. He decides to begin anew with this new people group and this new nation, and he's going to build this great nation that are going to follow him. And so he finds this older couple, Abraham and Sarah, who can't have children, and for whatever reason he says, you guys are great. I'm going to use you guys. And he calls them from where they are, and he uses them. And so this is where Abraham's story starts. In Genesis 12, we have the beginning of this call of God to Abraham. It says, Genesis 12, the Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So we have these incredible promises from God that Abraham is going to grow into this great nation. He's going to grow into a family that's going to grow and grow and grow into this great nation. It's a promise of descendants, a promise of children to come. It seems kind of like a challenging thing for God to do, using a 75-year-old couple that have yet to be able to have children. He promises Abraham, your name is going to be great. He promises Abraham that all peoples on earth, everyone who lives from now on will be blessed through Abraham. But how does that even work? What does that even mean? I was thinking this week, like, Abraham can't even fathom what this promise means. Like how can Abraham fathom where he's at when he receives this promise to Israel, to God himself coming through his lineage, to the church, to this whole history that we can now sit back and see? Abraham cannot even fathom these promises. So what does this even mean? All peoples on earth will be blessed through Abraham. How is that going to work? So next verse, it says, Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Why does Abraham go? Like, what does it mean that God spoke to him? Do you ever think this when you read these stories? God, does this mean like an audible voice? Does it mean a deep sense, deep in his bones, that he needed to go? And why does he go? I mean, Abraham knows nothing about this God who is speaking to him. Abraham's only the 12th chapter in the Bible. He doesn't have podcasts to listen to. You know, he doesn't have a seminary to go and ask questions about who this God is. There's no books to refer to. And he leaves the security of his family and his clan and the family business. He probably worked with his father in the family business. And he ventures out to this place he doesn't know. He does take Lot. I don't know if you noticed that. He takes his nephew Lot. So already he follows the command mostly, but he also drags Lot around. Maybe Lot's a bit of a security for Abram. And Lot does nothing but cause issues for Abraham. Lot almost gets Abraham killed a couple of times. But Abraham goes and he leaves. Like, this is hard for us to imagine. Although we do live by the mountains, hard for us to imagine how dangerous it is for Abraham to venture out with just him and Sarai and his little clan of people there, some servants that he would have accumulated and probably some cattle. But for him to leave the safety of his family, this is incredibly dangerous. Do we have any fans in the audience of the new show on Netflix, Outlast? Nobody? Okay. Or the show Alone? Anyone know these survival game shows? Yeah, I love these shows. Or I love on YouTube watching like survivalists in the forest, and I'll watch people do camping and anything from, there's one guy I watch where he just takes a knife, like he's only going for the weekend, but that's still a long time. He takes a knife and he shows you how he survives a weekend in the wilderness with just a knife, and he makes fire with the knife, and he hunts with the knife. Or there's these shows, Outlast, where it's the Outlast, you have to stay on a team and you're surviving alone, you're by yourself. I love these shows, and I love to think of myself as able to survive out alone. But I learned the hard way that I will not survive out alone by myself. I did a hike in 2021 when I was just visiting Banff, out Edith and Corey passes, and I brought too little water. It was way hotter than I was expecting, and I didn't see anybody on the path. And the whole time, I was terrified of running into a grizzly bear, and I did not enjoy myself at all. Climbed up this mountain, got close to where I was going, to the top, didn't see anybody for about 2.5 hours, and the first people I saw, I was like, can I go back down with you guys? And I followed them back down, and that was a good lesson that Jake is not meant for alone in the wilderness. Jake will die in 48 hours. So, we learn these things. But Abraham goes. He goes to this place where God sends him. This is incredibly dangerous stuff that Abraham does. And in the New Testament, we have the book of Hebrews. Actually, some people think it's a sermon that was written and passed around. We have this book or this sermon of Hebrews, and the author is reflecting back on this Abraham story. And so Hebrews says this: by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. I don't even know if he had heard of the land of Canaan. God says, go to the place where I will show you. What does that mean? Is God showing up every 10 miles? Like, yes, this is the way, keep going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. And this is what Hebrews says. This is why Abraham went. He was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Abraham goes out in faith because he's hungering and he's looking for something only God can provide. There's some sort of discontentment. And of course, God also calls Abraham. And so there's this strong compelling from God, this strong leading from God. It seems God chooses Abraham, and yet God chooses Abraham because he sees something in Abraham. And there's this longing in Abraham for a city whose architect and builder is God. This is talking about a city that we cannot produce in our human ability. This is longing for something beyond what we can provide for ourselves. Anybody here long for something beyond what we can provide for ourselves? Yeah. I mean, it's why we're here week after week. We're looking for that city whose foundations and whose architect and builder are God. And so Abraham sets out by faith, Hebrews says. I think about faith as this trust that compels you to action. Actually, my favorite picture of faith comes from a very important source, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I love this picture of faith because it's this scene at the end of the movie. The movie came out in 1989, so if I'm ruining it for you, well, you've had 40 years to watch it. But at the end, Indy is going through these different obstacles. He's trying to save his father who's been shot. And what happens? He comes to the edge of this cliff and there's this chasm and probably 30 feet to the other side, and it just drops where you can't even see the bottom. And not Abraham, Indy has to take this massive step of faith. And I love the way Spielberg shoots the whole scene and the way he reveals, because where Indy's standing, there's no path there. And the whole idea is it's this leap of faith. And so, are you guys with me? Have you seen this movie? Yes. Some of you are like super nostalgic right now. Yes, as am I. And what does he do? He puts out his foot, right? And he stands, and there's nothing there still, and he lets himself fall. I'm not going to do that because nothing's there. And he lets himself fall forward. And what happens, right? It's like, dunk. And there's something there. And then the camera pans and it turns to the right, and you see that there's this bridge there that he couldn't see. But this is a great picture of faith because this is what God asks us to do. We say to God, show us the path and then we'll go. But often in our life, God wants us to put the foot out first, lean forward into the unknown, and he will make the step firm. Are you with me? Have you experienced this yourself? This is how we're. I love that picture. I also love another movie from the 90s, Hook, Robin Williams, and he's supposed to eat and he doesn't see any food and he's really hungry and he's really mad, and all the Lost Boys who have this great imagination, they're all eating, and Robin Williams is getting grumpy and he's like, where's the food? And it's not until Robin Williams as Peter Pan participates in the imagination of food that he's able to see the food around him. And I just think these are pictures of, like I said, we often say, okay, God, you show up first and I will follow. And God often wants us to move in a direction, to take steps of faith even before we see the end results. I mean, that's what faith is. Faith is having confidence, Hebrews says, in what you don't have yet, what you don't see yet. And as we take those steps of faith, the provision arrives. So Abraham sets out, Sarah sets out with him, And their journey, I mean, it doesn't say, if you read the rest of the story, Abraham sets out and life is easy from then on out. Their journey is actually life-threatening, near-death experiences from the very beginning. I already mentioned the danger of them setting out by themselves, leaving the safety of their clan. They arrive where God tells them to go, and the very next story, a famine hits. And so now Abraham is following this God with his barren wife, and now they are in a barren land. And if you've been married for a while and you take your wife on a crazy adventure and it doesn't go well, like I can imagine Sarah saying, "You sure God's talking to you?" There's tension here. These are real people. This isn't Abraham who knows everything's going to go great. They get to this place God told them to go, and a severe famine hits, and it forces them to go on the road again. So they're in Canaan, modern day Israel, and they're forced to travel again south. They're forced to leave again, and there's more danger. And as the story goes on, there's just all of these near-death experiences. Abraham is obeying God. Abraham is walking with God by faith, and yet he still has all of these near-death experiences, having to travel down to Egypt, and then he knows that Sarah's a beautiful woman, and Abraham is worried that Pharaoh is going to kill Abraham and take Sarah, and so Abraham convinces Sarah to tell everyone that she is his sister, not his wife, which endangers Sarah. And all of this goes on, all of these life-threatening experiences, and they still have no children. And years are going by. There's these great promises in Genesis 12, and time is going on, and there's still no children. And so we get to Genesis 15, and some time has passed. We don't get the time marker in Genesis 15 about their age like we do in other passages, but this is somewhere around when they're late 70s, early 80s. Time has gone on. Abraham has had to bail Lot out and rescue Lot when Lot gets captured in a war. And it says in Genesis 15, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, "O Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus?" And Abram said, "You've given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." Abraham he's beginning to object to what God is saying. He's starting to struggle here. God comes with another promise. I am your shield. I am your reward. And Abraham's response is, "Oh, Lord." I love this scene because there's a lot of "oh, Lord" moments in my life. There's a lot of moments of confidence, of certainty in what God has called me to be, who he's called me to be. And there's a lot of "oh, Lord" moments in my life. One of the coffees I had with Matt a little while ago, I said, "Matt, I think if I'm being honest, when we left Nova Scotia, I kind of looked to Calgary like the promised land." Which, yeah, right? It's like, it's a great place, but it's not the promised land. There's struggles here like Nova Scotia, right? And I think I had to swallow this hard pill that I had looked at Calgary to be kind of this place, oh, it's going to be so smooth, we're going to figure it out, it's going to be great. All the things that were challenging for us in Nova Scotia are going to get sorted out in Calgary. And of course, I had a lot of "oh, Lord" moments. Our first 14 months here. We had a school, we lived in Woodbine for the first year that we moved here. We had a school across the street that had these giant, a few ball fields and soccer fields. And almost every day I would just walk my dog circles around that field and pray these sort of "oh, Lord" prayers. Like, "Oh, Lord, what are we doing here? Oh, Lord, what's next?" To the point where that place has kind of become another holy ground for me. It's a special place where God met me over those 14 months. And so I can relate. I mean, I can't relate to being barren at 75 years old. Most of us can't. But I can relate to Abraham when he says, oh, Lord, like, why are these promises taking so long? Where's the promised child? Abraham's saying, I'm not 75 anymore. I'm older now. And this is faith. This is the journey of faith. This is the rawness of authentic faith. It's not a walk in the park. And here, God reiterates his promises. I don't have it on the screen, but he tells Abraham, no, it's not going to be one of your servants that I'm going to bring descendants through. It's going to be someone from your own flesh and bones. And he reiterates his promise to Abraham, and Abraham believes God again. It's a great quality that Abraham has, to believe God again. And so here's chapter 15. God shows up, reiterates his promises. Babies are coming. Let's get the party started. They're already in their 80s. Let's go. They already need some divine turbo to make this thing happen. And we get to chapter 16, verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. It's just this like up and down, up and down, up and down. Well, we have to move on with the story, but it takes 25 years from the time God first promises Abraham, I'm going to make you into a great nation, to the time that Abraham and Sarah finally have their child, Isaac, this promised descendant. 25 years. Yes, Abraham is 100 years old when they have Isaac, and Sarah is 99 years old when they have Isaac. You know, and in chapter 16, you know, when they're in their 80s, again, they try to take matters into their own hands. They're trying to figure out this promise from God. And Sarah convinces Abraham, maybe what God means is you're supposed to have a descendant with one of my servants. And so Abraham has a son with Sarah's servant Hagar, which was commonly practiced in that day. Again, they are trying to figure it out, but it's 25 years of faith and walking and struggle. And this is the story of faith. I was thinking we could have just as easily called this series The Hall of Pain or The Pain of Faith. You know, like Hebrews 11 is written to a people who are struggling. If you look at Hebrews 10 and you look at Hebrews 12, on either side of Hebrews 11, it's written to a people that are deeply struggling in their faith. And the writer is calling them to persevere. And every story that he lists, Abraham, Moses, and then he goes quickly to list David and Samson, and then he says, you know, I can't tell you about all the other people that struggled for their faith. It was because of their faith that they struggled. It was because of their faith that they took that step to follow Jesus or to follow God, like Abraham and Sarah, and they struggled in their faith. This is the journey of faith. It's a hall of faith. It's amazing to step out, and it's also like signing up for a hall of pain to follow God. Of course, Abraham and Sarah witnessed amazing things, but they also experienced anguish. And they imperfectly followed God. They had flaws. They had failures. They tried to take matters into their own hands. They tried to discern what God was saying. They misunderstood some things, and then they just got frustrated and just drove ahead on their own decisions. And I think I love this story because this, in so many ways, is all of our stories. I think we can all relate to times of anguish, times of waiting, long times of waiting, seasons where we are deeply actually disappointed by our faith, hurt because of our faith. I mean, all of us are traveling towards some destination every day. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're hoping that you're walking a road of obedience to God, but we're all moving towards some sort of destination. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're pursuing some vision of a promised land that somebody promised you, but all of us are on this journey of walking towards some sort of hoped for destination. And we are all going to find ourselves in prolonged seasons of waiting, frustration. And for those of us who do follow Jesus, Abraham and Sarah show us how God keeps using frustrated, fragile, scared, sinful, weak, powerless people if they keep lifting their eyes again and again back to him. That's the thing Abraham does so well. He keeps believing God. He keeps going back to God. And he, like I said, he knows so little about this God, but this is what he does so well. When God shows up in his story, sometimes appearing to Abraham in a vision or appearing before Abraham, or sometimes speaking, Abraham keeps believing God and moving towards him and trying to believe this God. But the other great thing about our faith is it doesn't fully depend on us. Abraham has no idea of this at the time, but this is also God holding him up. This is God sustaining Abraham. When God makes a promise to Abraham, I mean, it's a done deal. God can't go back on his promise. This is what covenant means. This is God binding himself to people. He can't go back on it. And he is sustaining, he is holding up Abraham as much as Abraham is looking back to God again and again. But this is the journey of faith. God holding us up as we fumble along, as we take those steps, as we have that sense that God is leading us to something. This is what faith is. I think sometimes we talk about faith as this superpower that's, going to give us a boost through hardship. Oh, if I just had more faith, then this would happen. If I just believed more, then this would happen. And it's true that faith, a sense of the presence and power of God in our lives, that brings a degree of power. It brings a degree of comfort. We can't walk with God without faith. My son Leo does not like sleeping, never has. He's sleeping good now, thank goodness. Those first few months, he was not sleeping. And every night we put him to bed, it's the same routine. We have to read to him, we have to sing to him. I say, okay, I'm gonna lay you down in your crib, I'm gonna sing some more. And as I'm getting ready to leave, because he always cries, and it's more manipulation at this point than anything. He always cries, and I always say to him, Leo, mom and dad aren't far, and you're never alone. Leo, mom and dad aren't far and you're never alone. And we're literally not far. We're either down the hall or across the hall. We are always close. And Leo has no idea of the layers of protection he has, right? Like there's parental love. We obviously love him and we're never going to leave him alone. But there's also criminal law where we legally can't leave him, even if we want to. And there's also technology, smoke alarms, and we have a baby monitor. And there's all these layers of protection that Leo has that are keeping him safe at night. And I think about that for myself. Okay, God, give me a sense. I'm never alone and you're not far. Never alone and you're not far. Give me that sense. And the more we can believe that, the king is in the room, like we sang, all my life you have been faithful, that is, in a way, a superpower. It's an amazing comfort. And yet, I want to be careful about thinking we just need to have faith and burst through this hardship. In Scripture, people went through hardship because of their faith, because of their obedience. And this is the way God works. I wish he would just kind of zap us all with his power and make things easy. I wish he'd make my life easier. But this is how God works. He always works by bringing life through death. Always works. The New Testament writers, they love to talk about how Abraham, I think it's kind of disrespectful, but how Abraham at 99 years old was basically dead. They're like, that guy was as good as dead. His body was dead. And this is how God works. He always brings life through death, always bringing life where there appears to only be barrenness, and hopelessness. Abraham and Sarah, they're nearly dead from the moment God calls them. There's innumerable near-death experiences in their story from Genesis 12 to Genesis 24, but that's kind of the point, is that life comes from God's miraculous power to take dead people and produce more life. It's kind of what you sign up for when you decide to walk a lifelong, authentic relationship with Jesus. He's going to produce life through you. Yes, he's going to use your gifts and your strengths, but he's also going to use your weaknesses and your frailty and the moments that you think are hopeless. And he's going to bring life through those moments. That's the backwards, upside down way of the kingdom, the way that Jesus works. I mean, we know, you can force people to do things by force, by power. God transforms us from the inside out through humility and weakness and bringing life where we only see death. So this is the journey of faith. This is what you sign up for if you decide to follow Jesus and to walk with Jesus. We want containment, we want ease. There's endless YouTube videos about like how to proof your life, right? Like recession-proof your finances, or safety-proof your marriage, or safety-proof your life, safety-proof your health. We want containment and ease, and God always wants to bring flourishing to all of his creation, and he chooses dead but resurrected people to bring that flourishing through. And that's what we sign up for. That's the journey of faith. Faith will require a trust like you cannot imagine. It'll require, like Abraham, again and again, going back to God, believing God. It'll require moments of sorrow. It'll require moments of, oh Lord, you promised this, but you haven't given me what you've promised. But God is always looking for people who are longing for that better country that he can partner with and bring flourishing through. He's looking for those people who will step out in faith despite the cost and follow him. So I want to invite you to stand with me. Before I close in prayer, and we do have prayer teams available at the front if you'd like prayer for yourself or prayer for someone else. If there's a season that you're in of waiting, of struggle, of disappointment, please feel free to come and receive prayer. Receiving prayer is one way to turn back to God, to look to God in faith. But let me close with these words from Hebrews 12 that comes after this list of these heroes of faith. In Hebrews 11, it says in Hebrews 12, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Let us run constantly fixing our eyes on Jesus, the beginning and the end of our faith, the one who called us, the one who sustains us, the one who is bringing us to that country whose architect is God. May Jesus open our eyes again to his work in our midst. May he open our ears to hear his voice calling us forward in faith. And may we go with faith and hope, remembering that we are not alone. May you go this week knowing the God who is with you, the God of Abraham and Sarah, who walks with us.